We're back. It's the election is over. Thank God. Always my least favorite time of year. What do you think we should start with?
Well, I think we can start with the results in Virginia and New Jersey, especially.
Sounds good to me.
We got some pretty whopping Democratic wins in both. If you remember, at the during the last episode, we reminded you that Harris won both Virginia and New Jersey by about 6 points. Right now, Spanberger in Virginia is winning by 14 and a half, and in New Jersey, Sherrill is winning by 13 and a half. So that's a pretty significant swing. That's basically an 8 point swing from 2024 when the Trump won the popular vote by one. So that's a pretty, you know, it's a rough estimate, but that points to a pretty democratic environment that we had this year. And usually things can change, but in general, that kind of gives you an indication as to where things are heading in the following midterm. And then the one other big result we had was that Proposition 50 in California, which will allow the Democrats to retake complete control of redistricting in California and use a gerrymandered map, is passing by 28, which is 8 points more than Harris won California by. This is also like kind of like a imperfect measure of partisanship, since it's kind of a it is a partisan amendment, but maybe some people had oppositions to it for more principled reasons.
Right.
But it's exceeding Harris's margin by a lot, and based on the patterns we've seen, I would expect it to not the margin would not change much. I think 28 is probably plus or minus one, maybe two is very likely. So not going to see a ton of change there. We have 80% of the votes in. California is the worst. I hate it. It shouldn't take this long.
I'm looking at it now. We're about 80% in, and
It's
I mean, as of we're recording,
Saturday.
we're a couple days outside
Yeah.
election day, and it probably won't be much higher by the time people actually watch this. So
Yeah, it'll
the
probably be
margin's
like
not that
85 or something on Monday. Yeah, it's pretty bad. But the margin is significant and it's not going to change too much. So that's very notable that that passed by such a wide margin. We'll see likely another version of Proposition 50 in Virginia too. And so because it's passing by such a wide margin, that is sort of an indicator that it maybe is not a complete sure thing, but would be pretty likely to pass in Virginia, given that it's also a blue state and we're exceeding Harris's margin here. So I would think that you'd feel pretty likely that the redistricting amendment that is certainly coming down the pipeline in Virginia will pass as well. And then I'll also note that Jay Jones won by about 6 points. He did like he's doing like just ever so slightly better than Harris. So he's basically matching Harris's margin, which is
which is
a
quite
little more than I was expecting, to be frank.
disappointing, but
Yeah,
it is what it is. I guess I would say across the country, of the races we have, it's about what, a 7 point swing overall,
a little more like eight,
which would be enough to take control of the House.
almost
And
definitely,
then the
even
Senate
with
is,
redistricting.
and I think the Senate is more complicated, obviously, but definitely leaves Democrats in the game to take control of the Senate as well.
Yep.
Even if that's much less likely.
Yeah, so I guess we can kind of move into redistricting now. So, there's been a lot of uh, pressure on Republican states to redraw their maps basically to give more Republican seats in 2026. We've seen some do it. Basically the big ones so far we've had are Texas, North Carolina, and Missouri. Ohio also redrew their map, but that was required by law because of their system there is a little weird. It's like sort of bipartisan, but not really. There's like a tiny bit of constraints on the gerrymandering. They can't completely do whatever they want, but the new map is still relatively gerrymandered. But Democrats didn't get completely wiped out. Basically, they hold three competitive seats in Ohio. Two of them got redder, and one of them got bluer. So it's kind of a wash. I think that the redistricting won't necessarily be the number one factor in what happens in Ohio. But Republicans will likely gain four in Texas when they stay. The kind of the punchline was that, oh, we're going to gain 5 seats in Texas. Well, one of those seats was a seat that they didn't actually change very much. In fact, they made it slightly bluer. That's the 28th district, where the incumbent Henry Cuellar has kind of some legal issues, but it's still the voters don't seem to care. He's run way ahead of Trump basically in all of the last three cycles, and so. I don't think that district is very likely to flip unless he is somehow prevented from running. But there are four of the districts that were made noticeably more Republican, so I think they should have a shot to gain those four. And then in North Carolina, they redrew a light Democratic district into a pretty safe Democratic district, so that's almost definitely going to be a plus one. And then in Missouri, Republicans drew basically a safe Democratic into a safe Republican, but there is a possibility that the map will be blocked by a referendum. My guess, if I had to guess, would be that the referendum will take place, which means that the redraw will not go into effect for 2026. But it also very well may pass if it does go onto the ballot because Missouri is so red, and so we could actually see that gerrymandered map go into effect in 2028 instead of 2026.
Hmm.
But we kind of have to see on that. The one thing about these results is that they're probably going to make Republicans a little more hesitant to be super, super aggressive. Because if
It
you
might make it worse.
know that a Democratic +7 environment is coming when the last election was a Republican, narrowly Republican environment, those seats that you're drawing are not necessarily going to be safe districts anymore.
Might dilute the vote a little bit more.
Yeah, so for example, in Kansas, the Republicans announced on election day. I don't know whether it was like right before or right after they saw the results, but they were not going to redraw, and I wasn't expecting them to anyway because they would very likely be struck down by the Supreme Court of Kansas, which is Democratic. So I don't think that was going to happen anyway, but I have to feel like that might kind of be a trend that we see now. Also, Indiana is still a maybe. There's questions as to whether they would try and draw out one or two Democratic districts. I think it's very unlikely they would draw out two Democratic districts. In the northwest corner of the state, which is near Gary, which is outside of Chicago, there's a light Democratic district that I think that they could pretty reasonably draw out, but the seat in Indianapolis is like very blue, so I don't think they would want to draw that out. But it's not clear that they actually have the votes in the state legislature to do either of those things, and so the Indiana map may stay the same. So that's another uncertainty. Utah, their Democrats may actually gain because the Republicans gerrymandered the map in 2021, and it was just now struck down for cracking Salt Lake City four ways into every single district in the state to make them all safe red. And so the Republicans passed a new map that's like honestly kind of still a little bit gerrymandered, and so I'm not sure if the court's actually going to accept it. So we might either get like two light red districts or like a very blue district in Utah. But Democrats should be gaining there almost no matter what.
What about Virginia as well? I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
we don't know exactly.
yeah, so we don't know exactly what's going to pass in Virginia. So the Virginia is currently 6-5 Democratic. There's a couple competitive districts on both sides, but my guess is that most likely they would be drawing a 9-2 map where all the districts are safe. So nine safe Democratic, two safe Republican. It is possible to draw a 10-1 map. I don't know if that would be VRA compliant though, but the Voting Rights Act may not be around much longer. So the Senate Democratic leader in Virginia has indicated that they're interested in doing 10-1. I'm not sure that that's really going to happen because even though like the yes, the environment will be good for them this year. This map still has to be in place for 2028 and 2030. So I think it's very likely that we'll just get a 9-2 map, which would be a +3 gain from what they currently have in Virginia. And then California, where Proposition 50 passed, I think it's pretty likely that they will be gaining 5 from that. So that's actually that's a more solid 5 than the 5 in Texas even ever was. Really, all the districts voted for Kamala Harris. There's one I think that was like 50-50 basically, but uh, it got a lot bluer compared to last time. So I definitely think that at least in 2026, it's very likely to be a 5 seat pickup in California. And so with California, Virginia, Utah, short of the Voting Rights Act being struck down, it's really not like that going to be a huge change. We could see anything from like a very slight Democratic gain to like a moderate Republican gain. Another complicated one is Florida.
Mhm.
Republicans do have the power to redraw in Florida, but I'm not sure how much they can really do there. I think there's a good chance that they'll redraw the districts in South Florida, which are pretty much all blue right now. There's a couple of safe red ones, and then a lot of like there's some like very blue and some like slightly blue. My guess is that they can kind of rearrange the moderately blue ones into like they'll basically create one Republican district and then surround it with more Democratic districts instead of like four. I think it's three. There's like three light blue. I say light blue. It's like voted for Harris between like 2 and 10. and so they could probably squeeze out a red district there. I don't know if they'd be 100% sure to win it in 2026 though. To see exactly what happens there. And then there are some other blue seats in Florida, but I don't really think that they can do much else. Maybe they could try and squeeze out one more, but Florida is like a bit of a complicated one. But the grand scheme of things, without the Voting Rights Act being struck down, there's really not going to be much change due to redistricting, at least in 2026.
I'm looking at it here. Yeah, I mean, Democrats would gain. There's still a lot of question marks, so it's basically a wash. The only other state I was wondering about was Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois could redraw. Pritzker, the Democratic governor there, said that he was quote unquote keeping an eye on Indiana to see what they do. So I guess they're maybe thinking if Indiana does redraw their maps, then maybe Illinois will eliminate another Republican district. Democrats do have the power to in Illinois, although it is it's very gerrymandered already. I have drawn a map where you can eliminate one more Republican seat, and so it's possible. My guess is that they're probably not super thrilled about doing that unless Indiana is going to redraw, and then maybe they will retaliate.
And then I guess lastly, I'll say there's the what about this topic is the Voting Rights Act. Obviously, I've talked about that before. That's going to the Supreme Court. That will be decided probably in June. What what um what would that mean for 2026? Because it seems like that would probably be too late.
I think that it's possible the Supreme Court could like expedite it, but my guess is that the Voting Rights Act, if it's now the other thing is we kind of talk about it it being struck down as if like it will completely cease to exist. It is possible that they kind of take a half measure and sort of reduce the scope. So currently, basically, there's sort of a requirement that you draw majority minority districts where possible. So in states like Alabama and Louisiana, this has kind of led to these sort of snaking districts that link together a bunch of mostly black cities across the state, and some of them are worse than others. The Louisiana map is pretty bad. It doesn't actually have to be quite that bad. The Republicans sort of uh, fudged it a little bit to protect Steve Scalise and Mike Johnson, because they had to redraw it in before 2024. So that one is kind of also the Republicans' fault that it's so ugly. But there could be a number of Democratic seats that are eliminated as a result of this. My guess is that the sort of the minimum would be three, and then on the maximum, I guess theoretically up to like 10 or so. But I'm not sure if they would really go that far. For example, in South Carolina, there's one very blue district and then a bunch of red districts around it. If they were to eliminate the one blue district in South Carolina, those other seats wouldn't be like super, super safe. They would be Republican leaning. Trump did win South Carolina by like 15 points or something. So they could make them pretty red. But I have to be honest, I think that is pretty likely that we would see like one Democratic district remain in South Carolina. I think one also might remain in Tennessee and Louisiana. So maybe we see like a Republican gain at five, maybe six if like the Republicans really try to go hard in Florida. They can maybe eliminate one more. So it would be a noticeable advantage for the Republicans if the Voting Rights Act is eliminated. But still, kind of not like the like permanent majority fear mongering that I think we've heard. I think it's not too likely that we're really just going to see like a unbeatable map, even if the Voting Rights Act is struck down, because of things like Proposition 50 and and what Virginia is likely to do. That's enough to like basically offset these gains. So it's potentially. I think the 2028 House map it looks a lot tougher than the 2026 one right now because we have a lot of changes that might favor the Republicans, but probably not in 2026, maybe 2028 or later.
Which which would affect whoever is elected president in 2028, not necessarily at the moment. So,
Yeah, so and also we would assume that the election will be a lot closer in
mhm.
2028. So, if the Republicans do like draw out like five districts with the Voting Rights Act and then maybe Missouri gets approved, that could be enough to like give them like a slight advantage in the House. So, there will be effects. And it will favor Republicans if the Voting Rights Act is struck down. But I don't think the maps were also honestly, I don't think the maps, even if the Voting Rights Act is struck down, will be any worse than they were in like 2016 and 2018. Uh, the Republicans absolutely like went extremely hard gerrymandering after 2010 because they won so many state legislatures. So even like swing states or states that we consider blue states now, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, were all Republican like gerrymanders and like really severe Republican gerrymanders. Um,
Yeah,
in the
there's
2010s, and that those are now more either independent or will be a Democratic gerrymander. So it's still not as bad as it even was in like just 5 to 10 years ago.
s- so you heard it here, folks. The doomsday permanent majority is not likely. Uh,
Yeah. At
so
the very least, I don't think that it's even a remote possibility that the maps would be such that Democrats couldn't win in a blue wave year. No configuration exists really where there would be a blue wave similar to what we saw this year or what we may see next year. That the Democrats would be like unable to take the House because the maps are so bad. That is not a very realistic possibility.
mhm. No, that makes sense to me. Now, what I'll say is, wouldn't the Voting Rights Act, if it was, say it was completely struck down, couldn't Democrats in northern areas, such as, not that it would work in Pennsylvania because we have a split legislature, but there are cities in the north that could theoretically be gerrymandered to give Democrats more seats to offset losses in the south.
Yep, that's a possibility. I will say that some blue states have some state level restrictions on that. Now, obviously, something like a new Prop 50 could undo that potentially. But yes, it would make it a bit easier to gerrymander states like Illinois or New York in the Democratic favor. Whether or not they would, again, sort of similar to the Republicans in the South, like they probably might not get rid of every single seat because it's not terribly easy to make all the other seats safe, but it could make it easier. Although some of those northern states are already pretty gerrymandered, so I'm not sure. It would help potentially, especially in like California too, would make it easier. But yeah, I don't think the retaliatory redraws are going to be too severe. But we'll have to kind of see what the playing field is after the 2030 elections, because then we'll have new maps after the census, and so that's a bit of too far out to have any kind of certainty. But we'll have to see.
Well, there'll also be new governors elected next year, so we'll have to
Yeah,
wait and see.
and in
Although they won't have
2030.
any they won't have any impact on the maps beyond 2030 because it's a 4-year term, but they could change things in
Yeah,
the
we could have short-term redraws
mhm.
potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess we could say, all right, well, what are we looking at next year broadly? We already said it looks like Democrats will have a House majority. Probably won't be a big one, just because the way the maps are. Um, maybe I'm thinking 225 seats around there, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think probably a little bit more depending on exactly how the redraws go. I've identified about 15 districts that are really not affected by gerrymandering, that Democrats have at least a very good shot of flipping. These are sort of like your more traditional swing districts, because not every single state is getting re-gerrymandered this year, even though it may feel like that.
Mhm.
Um, but especially like in the Midwest, where the states are not completely gerrymandered, like Pennsylvania, Michigan is not gerrymandered. Wisconsin is like a little bit Republican leaning. Like they sort of were able to put their finger on the scale, but it's not like an extreme gerrymander. Um, and also in New Jersey, Arizona, there are a number of competitive seats where the Democrats could win, irrespective of redistricting. And Republicans will have a few opportunities. There was a big retirement for the Democrats in Maine, the second district, where Jared Golden is a sitting Democrat who represents the reddest district currently held by a Democrat. He retired, so Republicans have a good shot to pick that up, and Republicans will have a good shot to pick up another red seat with a Democratic incumbent in Ohio that was redrawn to be a little bit redder. So Republicans will have a few opportunities, but probably not more than those two, or maybe one other will pop up, other than redistricting. But yeah, I definitely think Democrats will probably be in for a decent majority if the trends from 2025 hold. In 2018, I think they got 235 seats. I would guess that they might get a little bit less than that, just because the maps are so more polarized and so much more gerrymandered that there's just not as many competitive seats as there were back then. So I think probably something like 225 to 230 is probably the most likely outcome right
That's
now.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Now, what about the Senate? That's a little trickier for them just because of
Yeah,
once
a
again
lot
the
trickier.
maps are everything in these in elections.
Yep. So not every state's going to have an election, but there are some Democratic opportunities. Right now, the Republicans have 53 seats, and because JD Vance breaks ties in the Senate, Democrats need an outright majority of 51 to take control
Hmm.
of the Senate. So the Democrats have like three notable seats that they have to defend, which would be Michigan, Georgia, and New Hampshire. Um, Michigan, there's sort of a contested Democratic primary. There's one really bad candidate. I think his name is Abdul El Sayed. And he's like a very like radical left candidate, like progressive. If he is nominated, he's not winning in the primary polls. That could be a problem. But there are two other Democrats in there who would probably be just fine. And Michigan is, yeah, Trump is able to win it in favorable years, but it's still a blue leaning, or at worst like a toss up state. And so in a blue year like this, it'd be pretty unlikely for that to flip unless a bad candidate is nominated. In Georgia, the Democrats have an incumbent. John Ossoff, who I would be very surprised if he lost. Brian Kemp, the Republican governor of Georgia, is not running. He's not very friendly with Trump, so that was my expectation that he would not actually run. And so another like backbencher race on Tuesday was there was like a statewide election in Georgia for like it had to do with like the government agencies that like I think it was called Public Service Commissioner. It had to do with like utilities and stuff. And the Democrats won by 23 points,
Whoa.
which is kind of ridiculous. Now the turnout was like very low and everything, so it's not like a perfect measure, but I definitely don't expect the Democrats to be losing Georgia in a blue environment like we're going to see. And then New Hampshire, Republicans have a decent candidate, but so do the Democrats, and it's a blue leaning state, so I don't really think that's going to be a problem.
Who are the candidates in New Hampshire? I'm not familiar.
Uh, John Sununu, who's not like the governor from 2 years ago, but like a senator in like 2010. I think he lost,
Oh,
or I think he lost re-election in like 2008.
okay.
Um, I don't know if he served a full term or if he won a special election, but he's running. He's like okay, I guess. I mean, he does have this Sununu name, which is like a big thing in New Hampshire, but it's still probably not good. The Democrats have a good candidate. I think it's one of the representatives in the House. I forget his
Okay.
name, but
So good candidate.
he's a good candidate. Yeah, he's not. I don't think he's going to lose. So those are kind of the Democratic seats, and then the Republican seats, which is where the Democrats need to gain. The two most obvious targets that are basically in swing states or blue states would be North Carolina and Maine. North Carolina is kind of simple. The um, Democratic governor, who was just term limited in 2024, he's running for the Democrats, and the Republicans have a candidate who's like not really a bad candidate, but kind of a nobody. His name is Michael Watley. He's like he runs some like the internal Republican Party stuff, but I would be shocked if he won. Trump did not do well in North Carolina. Was able to win it, but he didn't do great, which is one of my predictions from 2024. Um, and so North Carolina is very competitive state, and in a blue year, and it's with such a strong candidate, I would definitely expect the Democrats to be maybe not running away with it, but I would be surprised if they lost. Um,
Me too.
and then the next one is Susan Collins in Maine, which if you follow in 2020, you'll know all about her. She kind of defied the polls and won re-election in 2020. Now I will say 2020 was like a blue leaning year, but like not that much. And that was also the first time that she was ever contested basically as in 2020, and she won by I think the top line margin was like 5 or 6 points, but there was ranked choice voting, so it was probably more like 3 or 4. So she won a close race against a well funded candidate, Sarah Gideon. But the Democrats have the sitting governor running. If she is nominated, I would have to think that she would have a very good chance at minimum. However, there is this guy Graham Plattner who is like a
Oh
really
gosh.
really bad candidate. He has had all kinds of scandals. Feel free to Google it.
Hmm.
We don't need to we don't need to get at every little thing here, but
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
crazy,
know if
kind of
that
a
would be allowed on
kind of
YouTube.
a crazy person with scandals and everything. So if
And
he
he's
wins the
leading in the
primary,
polls.
Yeah, I mean, it is really early. Like, there was only like one poll, I think, but um,
Is
we'll see. I still think, being the sitting governor, Janet Mills, like she's probably, I would think that she would win, but we'll see how it goes. If she does not win the primary, then that is probably going to be a fumbled race, sort of like the Republicans did in 2022. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. I don't know exactly when the primary is. It's not for at least like 6 months, probably more.
I think it's in June, so we still have a
Ju
long
Yeah,
ways
so
to go.
that's a later primary. So yeah, so we'll just have to wait and see. Um, and then, so if they were to win North Carolina and Maine, that would get the Democrats to 49. So they still need two more, and so that's where we're sort of getting like deep into red territory. So the next sort of tier of targets would be Ohio, Alaska, Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. And all of those states voted for Trump by double digits at minimum. Some by like closer to 20. So Ohio, the senator who was defeated in 2024, Sherrod Brown, is running again, and he did put up a good performance. He lost by 3 points while Trump was winning by about 11. So pretty good overperformance. Now that Republican candidate was kind of bad, so that probably factors into it a little bit. Uh, there's an appointed incumbent Republican in this seat. Uh, if historically, whenever there's an appointed incumbent, you can basically treat it as an open seat. It doesn't really have the same effect as incumbency does, in other cases.
Hmm.
So I think that this is a possible target in Ohio, but I still think it's tough. Ohio is quite a red state now. It's really in no sense of the word would you consider it a swing state. So maybe if the governor's race is increasingly competitive, that could help the Democrats a little bit. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's like the failed 2024 presidential candidate, who's kind of extreme, is running for governor. If he struggles, maybe that could help a little bit. So, it's kind of a reach, but possible, I would say. And then similar in Alaska, which Trump won by, I think, about 13 points in 2024. Um, the defeated U.S. Representative Mary Peltola is not certain to run, but from what I've seen, it seems likely she will.
She might
Uh,
run for
she
governor.
might run for governor, so that's the a consideration. But if she runs, I think the Democrats would have a shot here, similar to
Well,
Ohio.
there's actually been some polls showing her ahead against
Yeah,
against
a couple
Bennett.
polls showing close or her ahead. So I think that this is a real opportunity, if assuming she jumps into the race. And I think that the Democrats have done a good job of getting recruiting candidates, unlike the Republicans who like couldn't get Brian Kemp, and couldn't really get anybody too strong in North Carolina. So I think that assuming she runs, this is actually potentially even like a toss up right out of the gate. Alaska's kind of, it's a small state. It's a little bit
They also have ranked choice
weird.
voting.
Yeah, they have ranked choice vote. Is that in the general? Yeah, it's in the general election too, right? So I
There's a
think,
jungle primary that will be held in August, and then the top four candidates will advance to the general election, which will have ranked choice voting.
yeah, so
Makes it a little
that's
trickier.
potentially interesting. There's a Republican incumbent in that seat. Not a bad candidate or anything, but also not like super kind of a low profile.
Hmm.
Senator Dan Sullivan. So I think this would be a pretty competitive one, assuming Peltola jumps in, and she won handily in 2022 and lost very narrowly in 2024. So she has a strong track record,
Well,
even
she's
better
the
than
first woman to
Senator Brown
I
in
was gonna say she's
2024.
the first woman to represent Alaska, or for I think period, but the first Democrat to represent Alaska in 10 years because of
Yeah,
they had a senator, but in the House of Representatives first since the Johnson administration, I think.
yeah.
So
Well, because Don Young was like in the House for like 50 years.
yeah, he was
He
in the
was
House forever.
he died like a couple years ago, and that's why he was replaced with the Democrat. Because Sarah Palin lost in 2022, and then they finally kicked her out. The Republicans told her not to run again, and she eventually listened. But anyway, so that's Alaska's an interesting one. I think that maybe unexpected in some sense. It's
a
such a red
safer
state,
race, maybe
but
one of
yeah,
those.
I think this is going to be a real opportunity in Alaska. Maybe even better than Ohio, but hard to say for sure. And then Texas is a big mess. The Republicans have a horrendous candidate, Ken Paxton, who is the sitting attorney general in Texas. He has scandals coming out of his ears. Um, Also, like an extreme like Trumper person. He's running against the sitting Senator John Cornyn, who is like not anti-Trump, but he's like kind of just like a regular Republican. And then another wrinkle is that a congressman from Houston, Wesley Hunt, also jumped in, and he's like sort of like more Trumpy than Cornyn, but less Trumpy than Paxton. And so there's probably almost definitely going to be a runoff because you have to get 50% in Texas. And so my guess is that against if Hunt is able to make the runoff, he would beat either Paxton or Cornyn. But in a three-way race, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. Um, so this is a huge question mark because Democrats should have a shot if Ken Paxton is the nominee. If not, probably not. Especially if Cornyn himself is able to win the primary, because he's a stronger candidate. He ran ahead of Trump by several points in 2020, which is the last time he was up for reelection. But then on the Democratic side, there's one good candidate, Colin Allred, who lost to Ted Cruz in 2024, but he ran like 5 or 6 points ahead of Trump. So that was pretty good. He's a good candidate. He was elected to the House in 2018. He flipped a swing district in Dallas. Um, and then there's a progressive candidate named James Tallarico from Austin. He's competitive in the polls with Allred. I think that he would be a weaker candidate. I'm not sure that even if he could even beat Ken Paxton, just because Texas is so red. And then another wrinkle is that Jasmine Crockett, who, if you may know, is kind of like a high-profile AOC like Democrat, also from Dallas, has considered running. She hasn't announced anything yet, but she's very clearly announced that she's looking into it. So that would be another source of trouble,
He's running
if you
out of
will.
time because the primary's on March 3rd.
Oh, is it that early? I forgot it
With
was
the
that early.
runoff on May 26th, I got it
Okay.
right up here. So she should have done it already if she's
Yeah, well, I don't I she still may. It's not 100% sure, but if she is nominated, I don't think she has a chance to beat any
mm-mm,
Republican.
nope.
Um
Her I look, everyone in DC, they either are 80 or their IQ is 80. And I'll tell you that Jasmine Crockett is not 80, so I'll let you figure out what her IQ is. She's not a very
yeah,
smart person.
yeah, extremely controversial and not likely to be able to win in a red state like this. So that sort of leaves us with like the extreme reaches. It's like all three of those races, like honestly, like could sort of plausibly be competitive.
Mhm.
Um, and then we kind of get into like the far reach territory, which I would consider Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. I'll start with Iowa because I really don't think this one is going to flip. I think the Democrats are actually probably going to win the governorship, or at least it'll be very close. Trump won Iowa by about 13 points, so that was a pretty wide margin. But the incumbent Senator Joni Ernst is retiring, although she wasn't very popular to begin with. So I'm not sure that that's really such a huge downside. Um, and the Republican candidate to replace her is Ashley Hinson, who's a House representative, and she is quite popular. She has a very good electoral track record, and she has like a red but not super red district, and she consistently overperforms and wins by double digits. So I don't really think that this is going to be that good of a target in Iowa. Kansas, it's not 100% confirmed yet, but it seems like the one Democrat who's in the House from Kansas, Sharice Davids, is probably going to run against Roger Marshall. Kansas is pretty red, though. I think Trump won it by like 18. Might have to double check on that. Might have been a little more, a little less. But Kansas is pretty red. There's a lot of like white suburban voters, which are kind of good in the blue wave potentially. There's also like potential tariff impacts with like farmers.
Mhm.
But I think this is also a pretty far reach just because Kansas is so red. But we'll see. I mean, we've had Democratic over performances in Kansas. Like they are
Yeah.
currently the incumbent governor is a Democrat. So we'll see. But I think this is also far reach. And then Nebraska, there's like an independent slash Democrat, Dan Osborne, who also ran in 2024. Um, I don't think that this is very likely to flip either. I feel like in 2024 he got close. I think he only lost by like 6 points or something, but there's kind of like a shock factor, I feel like, and he was like a fresh face. compared to like a long sitting Republican incumbent who's kind of a backbencher. Um, I don't really know that that's going to play as well the second time around, um, especially against a more. The other senator, I think, is Pete Ricketts,
Yeah.
who was just elected in 2024, and
He
he
was
was
governor
governor
before
before
that.
that. Yeah, so I don't really think that he's going to lose to the independent, especially with it not being the first go around where there's sort of that like surprise factor, like, oh, who's this new guy? He's kind of cool, But like I don't think that one's either. So I think that the real targets are Maine and North Carolina are the big ones, and then the Democrats need two out of the three reaches of Alaska, Ohio, and Texas. There also is a race in Florida, but like
No.
the Republicans are not going to lose Florida. So once upon a time that would be considered like a reach or a swing state, but not anymore. I would be so it probably won't even be single digits. So
Well,
that's kind of it's a harder map in the Senate, and the Senate is favorable to the Republicans because of like small and medium states. So I don't think that the Democrats are too likely to regain control this year, at least, or in 2026.
Well, I will say though, and while candidates are good, you want a good candidate. For example, Carrie Lake was not a good candidate, still is not a good candidate, never will be a good candidate, and that's probably why she lost. But I will say is I've noticed in Democrats that run in leaning red or not leaning red, if they run in likely red or safe red seats, even if they're great candidates, they still lose. And so no, so what I'll say is in some of these states, like I am concerned about, like Nebraska, even if Dan Osborne is a good candidate, or maybe even Alaska or Ohio, no matter how good the candidate is, usually they still lose. That's just what I've noticed in my time. You know,
Yeah, I mean, we've had some history, like recent history. John Tester lost re-election in 2024. Sherrod Brown lost re-election in 2024. In 2020, there were a couple of like these reach states where the Democrats came up short in all of them. There was Montana, South Carolina, Kansas, and Iowa.
I mean, Jamie Harris
All
is supposed to win in South Carolina. Well, not
Yeah, well,
supposed
I
to.
never thought he was going to win, but I
No, I
know.
never thought he was going to
Yeah,
win either, but there was a lot of hype around it, like, oh, he might win in South Carolina, and he got blown to bits.
yeah, and 2024 and 2020 were not super blue environments. 2020 was light blue, I would say, and 2024 was light red. Um, you know, I think that in a midterm, there's a little bit more opportunity than in a presidential year, especially with Trump being so polarizing that like he sort of like drags the rest of the ticket either up or down with him, which we kind of saw a lot in 2020 and 2024. I think there's maybe a little bit more opportunity because in 2018 the Democrats lost. They kind of had a mixed bag in like the safe red states. They were able to hold on to a couple with their incumbents, but in some of the reddest states they weren't able to hold, except West Virginia, which is just weird. But like in 2018 they lost in North Dakota, Indiana,
Missouri.
Missouri, and Tennessee. So those are
No,
four.
Florida. They
Well, they
held on
also
to
lost.
Tennessee, they lost Florida.
No, I mean the Democrats lost Tennessee.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
Democrats lost
It
Tennessee,
was
their
it
candidates
the
moved
it
to
wasn't a sitting Democrat, but it was a, like, quote, unquote, "competitive" race. It was closer than usual, to be fair. Like, all these races were, like, the Democrats overperformed greatly, but, there is a pretty red baseline in these states. Like, that's why I kinda think, like, Alaska is maybe a better shot because it's, like, a small state, really does not like Trump very much. Um, he Trump has not done as well as some past Republicans in Alaska. Love a very urban, population base. So I think
Okay.
that may be a better target than like something like Texas or Ohio. Texas, though, is not as red as it once was. Like it's not as red as Missouri or North Dakota or Tennessee, certainly. So and the other thing with Texas is that it's kind of had a lot of internal swings over the last really 20 years, even maybe not 20, maybe more like 15. But a lot of suburban areas have swung left against Trump, and then in 2024 he got some back, especially with the minority voters. And then the more Hispanic parts in the south of Texas swung right in 2020 and 2024. So there's a lot of swing voters in Texas. If I had to what I had to say. So I wouldn't, if the Democrats get the right matchup there, then I wouldn't be. I don't think any of those three we talked about are too outrageous.
Mm.
The Texas, Alaska, and Ohio, I think, are all at least somewhat decent potential. But beyond that, I would be pretty surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they could try to throw resources. I'd say if considering their what's happened the last week in the elections is that they have a lot of they're probably gonna have a lot of money, assuming. Republicans will probably have a decent amount of money too, but assuming they have a lot of money, they should try as many as possible. My guess is, though, a very early prediction here, is they're only gonna be able to win either none of them or one of these reach states, depending on what happens. Like, I don't think they're gonna win
Yeah,
majority. I think
they
it's
they need to.
they
So
need
it's
3
not
reaches, I
easy.
think 1 is even a stretch.
Yeah, maybe Alaska would probably be. I think that might be the best one so far. Um,
Me too.
and Texas. I mean, Texas might not even be competitive if the primary doesn't go up for the Democrats. So we
Mhm.
totally have to. That's a very much on like wait and see. And so then they need Ohio if that's the case. So
And
yeah, I
Texas
think
won't know until
the
May.
most likely outcome of the 2026 election will be that Democrats flip the House and Republicans lose seats but retain the Senate.
Me as well, and then there's also governors elections across the country, obviously that's, more local factors, and I don't think many people really care about that. So,
Yep,
no, I think that covers it. That leaves us for the next few months anyway, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in these primaries,
yep,
especially in Texas
yeah. Those are going to be
and
important.
Maine. So,
Yep.
alright, well, I think that's all for now.
Okay. Great.
Alright, well, thanks for coming on as always, and, hope to have you back soon.
All right. Thanks.